She stares at her phone. 2:47 a.m. His last message was 6 hours ago. A simple good night that somehow felt different, colder, distant. She's read it 43 times, analyzing every letter, every punctuation mark, searching for hidden meaning in 2 words. Her heart races, her stomach churns, her mind spirals through 1,000 scenarios. Is he losing interest? Is there someone else? Did she say something wrong? Do something wrong? Be something wrong? This isn't love. This is addiction. And she's not even aware it's happening. Welcome to the hidden psychology of female attraction, the neurochemical cocktail that transforms rational women into obsessed creatures, the evolutionary programming that makes her crave what she can't have, and the psychological patterns that turn ordinary men into her personal drug. Understanding this isn't about manipulation, it's about comprehension. Because when you understand the science behind her longing, you understand something profound about human nature itself. 1. The neurochemical addiction, how her brain gets hooked. Her attraction to you isn't emotional, it's chemical, and chemicals are addictive. Let's start with the science. When a woman is attracted to a man, her brain doesn't just think differently, it literally changes. The same neurochemical pathways that activate during cocaine addiction light up when she's infatuated with you. Dopamine floods her system. This isn't the happiness chemical, it's the wanting chemical. It's what makes her check her phone obsessively, analyze your every word, and create elaborate fantasies about your future together. Dopamine doesn't say, "I'm satisfied." It says, "I need more." But here's where it gets interesting. Dopamine isn't released when she gets what she wants. It's released when she anticipates getting what she wants. The moment before the text, the seconds before you walk through the door, the uncertainty before you make your move. This is why the woman who has your complete attention often loses interest, while the woman who can't quite figure you out becomes obsessed. Her brain is literally engineered to crave the uncertain, the unpredictable, the almost, but not quite. Add norepinephrine to the mix, the stress hormone that makes her heart race when she sees you, makes her hands shake when you touch her, makes her unable to eat or sleep when you're on her mind. This isn't comfort, this is chemical intoxication. Then comes phenylethylamine, the natural amphetamine that creates those butterflies in her stomach, that giddy feeling when you're around, that sense that everything is more vivid, more intense, more real when you're in her presence. Finally, oxytocin binds her to you. Released during physical touch, deep conversation, and intimate moments, it's the chemical that makes her feel safe with you, connected to you, bonded to you. But oxytocin has a dark side. It makes her more susceptible to manipulation, more likely to overlook red flags, more willing to sacrifice her own needs for the relationship. Together, these chemicals create a perfect storm of addiction. She's not choosing to obsess over you. Her brain is compelling her to. She's not deciding to lose herself in the relationship. Her neurochemistry is hijacking her rational mind. This is why she can't just get over you. This is why she checks your social media at 3 a.m. This is why she analyzes every interaction for hidden meaning. She's not being crazy, she's being human, and human brains are wired for addiction. But here's the crucial part. This chemical cocktail isn't triggered by kindness, availability, or devotion. It's triggered by uncertainty, challenge, and intermittent reinforcement. The man who's always there, always available, always reassuring, rarely triggers this neurochemical response. The man who's sometimes there, sometimes distant, sometimes warm, and sometimes cold, he's the one who activates her addiction circuits. Understanding this doesn't mean being cruel or manipulative. It means recognizing that attraction operates on a different frequency than logic. that her heart doesn't want what her head thinks it should want, and that the behaviors that make logical sense often kill the very attraction you're trying to maintain. The question isn't whether this system is fair or rational. The question is whether you understand it well enough to work with it instead of against it. 2. The evolutionary program, why she craves what she can't control. Her desire for the unattainable isn't a bug in her programming, it's a feature. Evolution doesn't care about your feelings, it cares about survival and reproduction. And for thousands of years, the women who survived and passed on their genes were the ones who were attracted to men who displayed specific traits. Traits that often had nothing to do with kindness or availability. Strength, resources, status, protection, genetic quality. These were the characteristics that meant survival for her and her offspring. But how does a woman's brain quickly assess these qualities in a potential mate? Through behavioral cues, through social dynamics, through the way other people respond to him, through his ability to remain calm under pressure, through his willingness to walk away if not treated with respect, through his capacity to make decisions without seeking her approval. These cues trigger what psychologists call pre-selection bias, the tendency to want what others want, to desire what seems scarce, to be attracted to what appears valuable. This isn't shallow or materialistic. This is survival programming that's been refined over millennia. This is why the man who's surrounded by other women often becomes more attractive to her. This is why the man who has options seems more desirable than the man who doesn't. This is why the man who's willing to lose her often gains her respect in ways the man who clings never will. Her brain is constantly running calculations. Is this man high value or low value? Is he chosen by others or ignored by others? Does he have options or is she his only option? Is he moving toward his goals or waiting for her approval to live his life? The answers to these questions determine not just her level of attraction, but her level of investment. The woman who perceives you as high value will invest more energy, more emotion, more of herself in winning and keeping your attention. The woman who perceives you as low value will invest less, withdraw more, and eventually lose interest entirely. This isn't conscious. She's not sitting there analyzing your market value like a stock trader. This evaluation happens at a subconscious level, processed by brain regions that evolved long before language, logic, or conscious reasoning. This is why her attraction to you can change so dramatically based on external factors. A promotion at work, the way your friends treat you, your confidence in social situations, your reaction to her tests and challenges, all of these feed into her subconscious evaluation of your value. But here's what most men miss. Her desire for the unattainable isn't just about assessing your value. It's about maximizing her own genetic investment. If she can win the attention of a high-value man who has options, her offspring will inherit those same high-value traits. If she settles for a man who has no options, she's potentially limiting her genetic legacy. This programming runs so deep that it often overrides her conscious preferences. She might logically know that the available, devoted man is better for her long-term happiness, but her attraction circuits are pulling her toward the challenging, unpredictable man who triggers her evolutionary algorithms. Understanding this isn't about becoming manipulative or playing games. It's about recognizing that attraction operates according to ancient rules that have nothing to do with modern dating advice. The man who tries to win her through devotion and availability is fighting against millions of years of evolutionary programming. The man who maintains his independence, his options, and his standards is working with that programming instead of against it. 3. The psychology of intermittent reinforcement. Why inconsistency creates obsession. The slot machine doesn't pay out every time. That's exactly why people can't stop pulling the lever. The most powerful tool for creating psychological addiction isn't constant reward, it's intermittent reinforcement. Unpredictable, irregular, sometimes yes, sometimes no patterns of behavior that create the strongest psychological bonds known to science. This principle was discovered by B.F. Skinner in his experiments with pigeons and slot machines. When rewards are given consistently, behavior becomes predictable and eventually boring. When rewards are given randomly, behavior becomes compulsive and obsessive. Apply this to human relationships, and you unlock the secret to why she becomes addicted to certain men while losing interest in others. The man who always texts back immediately, always says yes to her requests, always makes himself available, always shows affection, he's providing consistent reinforcement. Her brain quickly learns the pattern. He's predictable, reliable, always there. While this might seem positive, it actually reduces dopamine production. Her brain stops anticipating because it knows what to expect. The man who sometimes texts back immediately and sometimes doesn't, who sometimes says yes and sometimes has other plans, who sometimes shows intense affection and sometimes seems distant, he's providing intermittent reinforcement. Her brain can't predict the pattern, so it remains in a constant state of anticipation, flooding her system with dopamine every time he does respond positively. This is why she checks his social media obsessively, but barely glances at the social media of men who are always available to her. This is why she analyzes every word from the man who's sometimes warm and sometimes cold, while taking for granted the words of the man who's consistently affectionate. Her brain interprets inconsistency as value. The reasoning is unconscious but simple. If he were low value, he would always be available, always eager to please, always seeking her approval. The fact that he's sometimes unavailable, sometimes unresponsive, sometimes focused on other priorities, suggests that he has options, resources, and a life worth living independent of her validation. But intermittent reinforcement goes deeper than just texting patterns or availability. It shows up in emotional intimacy, physical affection, attention, and validation. The man who shares deeply sometimes and remains mysterious other times creates more intrigue than the man who's an open book. The man who's physically affectionate in private but maintains some distance in public creates more tension than the man who's constantly touching her. This principle explains why the bad boy archetype is so universally attractive across cultures and generations. It's not that women are attracted to men who treat them poorly. They're attracted to men who provide intermittent reinforcement, moments of incredible connection followed by periods of distance, times of intense attention followed by times of distraction, experiences of feeling special followed by experiences of uncertainty. The key insight is this: her addiction isn't to the negative treatment. It's to the unpredictability. It's to the high highs that feel even higher because of the lower lows. It's to the dopamine rush that comes from not knowing what to expect next. This is why relationships often lose their spark over time. As couples become more predictable to each other, the intermittent reinforcement naturally decreases. The mystery fades. The uncertainty disappears. The brain stops producing the neurochemicals that created the initial attraction and obsession. Understanding this pattern allows you to maintain attraction not through cruelty or manipulation, but through maintaining your own independence, unpredictability, and autonomy within the relationship. The man who continues to have his own goals, his own interests, his own social circle, his own challenges, he naturally provides intermittent reinforcement because he's not always available, not always focused on her, not always predictable. The woman who experiences this doesn't feel neglected or undervalued. She feels challenged, intrigued, and constantly reattracted to a man who remains somewhat of a mystery even as the relationship deepens. 4. The validation trap. How her self-worth becomes tied to your attention. She didn't fall in love with you, she fell in love with who she became when she was with you. Here's where the psychology becomes particularly complex and potentially destructive. When a woman becomes addicted to a man, she's often not addicted to him as a person. She's addicted to the version of herself that exists in his presence. This happens through a process psychologists call reflected appraisal. The tendency to see ourselves through the eyes of others, especially those we perceive as high value or significant. When she's with you, when you're paying attention to her, when you're choosing her over other options, she feels valuable, desirable, worthy of love. But here's the trap. If her sense of self-worth becomes dependent on your attention and approval, your withdrawal of that attention doesn't just disappoint her. It threatens her entire sense of identity. She doesn't just miss you. She misses who she was when she was with you. This creates a psychological dependency that goes far beyond normal attraction or even love. She needs your validation to feel good about herself. She needs your attention to feel valuable. She needs your approval to feel worthy. Without these things, she doesn't just feel sad, she feels lost, confused, empty. This is why some women become completely consumed by relationships while others maintain their independence. It's not about personality type or emotional maturity. It's about where they source their self-worth. The woman who derives her value from her own accomplishments, relationships with family and friends, personal growth, and individual goals will be attracted to you but not addicted to you. The woman who derives her value primarily from romantic relationships will become psychologically dependent on your validation. The dangerous part is that this dependency can masquerade as deep love or intense attraction. She seems completely devoted, utterly committed, willing to sacrifice anything for the relationship. But underneath, she's not loving you. She's clinging to you because without you, she loses her sense of self. This explains why some women become more obsessed when treated poorly and more distant when treated well. Poor treatment threatens their self-worth, creating anxiety and desperation to regain your approval. Good treatment feels nice but doesn't create the same psychological dependency because it doesn't involve the threat of losing their sense of value. Men often mistake this dependency for genuine attraction or love. They think the woman who can't live without them, who organizes her entire life around them, who seems lost without their attention. They think this woman loves them more than the woman who maintains her independence. But dependency isn't love. It's addiction. The woman who's addicted to your validation will do almost anything to maintain it. She'll compromise her own values, neglect her own goals, abandon her own interests, sacrifice her own relationships. She'll tolerate behavior she wouldn't normally accept, overlook red flags she would normally notice, and stay in situations she would normally leave. This might seem advantageous from a male perspective, having a woman who's completely devoted and willing to do anything to keep you. But this kind of relationship is ultimately unsustainable and unfulfilling for both parties. She becomes increasingly desperate and clingy. You become increasingly burdened by her neediness and lack of independence. The healthiest relationships involve two people who are whole and complete on their own, choosing to share their lives together rather than using each other to fill internal voids. The woman who's attracted to you but not addicted to your validation is the woman who will maintain her attractiveness, her independence, and her ability to contribute to the relationship rather than just consume from it. Understanding this distinction is crucial for any man who wants to build something meaningful with a woman rather than just experience the short-term high of being desperately needed by someone whose self-worth depends on his approval. 5. How emotional investment creates psychological hierarchy. In every relationship, there's a pursuer and a pursued. The one who cares less has all the power. The final piece of the puzzle is perhaps the most politically incorrect but psychologically accurate. Relationships are power dynamics, and emotional investment is the currency of that power. The person who invests less emotionally holds more power in the relationship. The person who invests more emotionally becomes subordinate to the other's choices and moods. This isn't a conscious game that people play. It's an unconscious dynamic that emerges naturally based on levels of investment, need, and dependency, and it has profound effects on attraction, respect, and long-term relationship satisfaction. When she invests more emotionally than you do, when she thinks about you more, initiates contact more, changes her schedule for you more, compromises her preferences for you more, she unconsciously places herself in a subordinate position. She becomes the one who adapts, accommodates, and adjusts to maintain the relationship. This investment doesn't make her more valuable to you. It makes you more valuable to her. It doesn't increase her power in the relationship. It decreases it. It doesn't make her more attractive. It often makes her less attractive because it signals that she has fewer options, lower standards, and greater need for the relationship than you do. This dynamic explains why many relationships follow predictable patterns. In the beginning, investment levels are roughly equal. You're both pursuing, both interested, both making effort. But over time, one person usually begins investing more heavily than the other. Once this imbalance occurs, it tends to become self-reinforcing. The higher investment person becomes more anxious about losing the relationship, so they invest even more. They become more accommodating, more available, more eager to please. The lower investment person becomes more comfortable with the arrangement, so they invest even less. They become more selective with their time and attention, more demanding of their preferences being met, more confident that the other person will adapt to their needs. This creates what psychologists call the pursuer-distancer dynamic. The more one person pursues, the more the other person distances. The more one person invests, the less the other person values that investment. The more one person needs the relationship, the less the other person respects them. From a female psychology perspective, this dynamic often determines her level of attraction and respect. She might consciously want a man who adores her, but unconsciously she's more attracted to the man who seems slightly less invested than she is. She might logically prefer the man who always makes her his priority, but emotionally she craves the man who has other priorities that sometimes come before her. This isn't because women are inherently manipulative or game-playing. It's because attraction is often inversely correlated with availability and directly correlated with perceived value. The man who's always available seems less valuable than the man who's sometimes unavailable. The man who has no other options seems less desirable than the man who chooses her among other options. Understanding this dynamic doesn't mean being cold, distant, or uncommitted. It means maintaining your own life, goals, and interests even within a relationship. It means not making her your entire world, even if you love her deeply. It means investing in the relationship without over-investing to the point where the power balance becomes unhealthy. The most sustainable relationships involve relatively equal investment levels, where both people maintain their independence, their options, and their ability to walk away if necessary. This equality creates mutual respect rather than the pursuit-distance dynamic that characterizes so many modern relationships. When she knows that you're with her by choice rather than need, that you value the relationship but don't depend on it for your identity or happiness, that you're invested but not over-invested, she's more likely to maintain her attraction, respect, and healthy. Use this knowledge wisely. The goal isn't to manipulate or control, but to understand and work harmoniously with the psychological forces that govern human attraction. When you do this successfully, you don't just get the woman, you get the best version of the woman, attracted to the best version of yourself.